I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender. Capella University is rethinking higher education. With its game-changing FlexPath learning format, you can earn your degree on your schedule and fit your education seamlessly into your life. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
This is a whole bunch. That's crazy. That's still the highest. I think that's still the highest grossing movie.
Yeah, and
time.
I can't even. You can barely ask anybody. Do you remember the plot of that movie? Like that has not inspired
anybody. The same
anybody.
Plot as Fern Gully. It's the same exact. There's a tree, and the tree is great, and we got to protect it. And then the bad people are coming to take it down. And then that's it. That's the whole plot of the movie. A guy who's a human becomes one of the Avatar people.
And then there's a love story.
That's it. And then there's a love story, because of course there is.
So this is a very special episode. I was going on a podcast with a good friend of mine, Brendon Lemon. The episode is the podcast is The Madness Continues, and Brendon Lemon's the podcaster. But before the podcast started, we started talking about every aspect we either mostly hated, and sometimes loved about Star Wars, the Marvel movies, Avatar, probably other movies, I forget now. And it was interesting from both a creative perspective and I thought, and I don't know, cultural perspective. I'm making that up, cultural perspective, who knows? But it was a fun conversation. That it was 20 minutes. That's the podcast you're about to listen to now. If you want to listen to the rest of the conversation then check out Brendon Lemon's The Madness Continues. That was kind of like the second part of this conversation, but enjoy these next 20 minutes. I hope you have fun. Tweet out at J Altucher if you have any comments or questions or whatever, and enjoy. I kind of feel like it's already done. Like, you know, the news cycle is already 36 hours, 72 hours. We're already done.
We already forgot about impeachment. That was like the biggest thing in the world like a week ago.
Well, you know why? Because a much bigger issue happened right after the impeachment that was really polarizing as well, which was, is the Rise of Skywalker good or not? Like that replaced...
I'm sure it's not. Yeah.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
I haven't seen it.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to see it. I don't want to give Disney... I know, Jay. I know. I don't want to give Disney any money.
Jay even...
Did you see it?
What are you talking about? Like, where...
Are you recording this? Yeah. Okay, good. Because this is like the biggest...
I saw it at 12:15 a.m. opening day.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Did you like it?
No, it was the worst movie ever. It was not a movie. It was a collection of anecdotes that vaguely paralleled the first trilogy.
Here's my theory on this. I just want to get this out on the record, on the public record.
This is the public record. A podcast is the public record.
That is what it is now.
Where's the congressional transcript with this podcast in it? I'd like to enter Brandon's podcast into the congressional transcript, Mr. Speaker.
Right. Let's just drop it. Yeah, we're going to get Library of Congress. What's the LOC number on this podcast? So Here's what I think. And this is what the online consensus seems to be, is that Disney buys the Lucasfilms franchise. They are way more interested, and I don't think it's just Kathleen Kennedy. I think it's like overarching. I think like Disney executive decisions are basically like, we just need to roll Star Wars movies out. Let's just keep it going. And so they really quickly get the schedule together, and they don't have any ideas. There's no story yet. And so they basically hire J.J. Abrams and his team to create the first movie, The Force Awakens, which was pretty good.
I like The Force Awakens. I actually like The Last Jedi.
Yeah. Do you?
Yeah.
I don't like The Last Jedi.
You know why I like it? Because I like the fact that they acknowledge finally that anybody can be Force sensitive, which makes sense.
Yeah. The last, to me, I felt like, I could rant about The Last Jedi for like an hour. There's like so many, but I just didn't like it. And the thing that more bothered me than the actual story, because you could have a difference on taste in The Last Jedi. I just want to say this. I don't think that if you like The Last Jedi, you're objectively wrong. I don't think that there's like an objectively bad.
Right. It's the same with The Force Awakens. Like, I like The Force Awakens, but then the day after, I remember Tucker Max actually wrote a review where he said this is beat by beat a repeat of, episode 4 Star Wars, the original Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I say, okay, that's a reasonable argument.
Totally fine. I mean, it is whatever. It's not. It's like, look, there's a million pizza places in this city, and if you went to the top 10, you'd get the same stuff on every pizza, and it would still be great. All of them would be good. You know what I mean? Maybe you get tired of pizza after a while. It doesn't bother me. It's a different flavor of the same thing. The Last Jedi was not that. I think The Last Jedi was Rian Johnson just being like, I'm gonna just do whatever I want to do, and they'll switch everything up.
Right. So I agree. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I agree that they should have had a plan in place. And it looked like he was just doing his own thing.
That's what bothered me more than the fact that I didn't like the movie, was that it just became clear after that point that Disney did not have a plan for what was going to happen.
Well, I think their plan was, let's give this to J.J. Abrams, who did Lost, he did Star Trek. He's clearly a genius. But what they don't realize in the nuances of J.J. Abrams is that J.J. Abrams is great at starting stories, and he has never once in his life ended a story. like Lost, that was the most brilliant start. The first 2 or 3 seasons, the most brilliant start of any TV series in history,
and
my
it became
opinion.
Impossible to finish.
Yeah, it was so many great things happening that he couldn't bring them all together at the end. Star Trek, everyone remembers the beginning of the reboot of Star Trek, like the first, let's say, hour of that movie. I can't remember anything else that ever happened after that. And Star Wars, okay, he started this he rebooted the franchise in some sense with these sequels, and he doesn't end stuff. He doesn't know how to end stuff.
Yeah.
And then every other series, he did Flash Forward, he did all these other mediocre series that he started off great
premise,
and then just didn't end.
Yeah, and then he can't end it properly.
Yeah.
So this is exactly.
They put Jon Favreau in there, who's doing a great job with The Mandalorian.
Okay, so
maybe
that
they
was
done it.
because Jon Favreau was involved with the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
And we, by the way, never talk about just like any nerd shit this much on this podcast, but this is great because I have so many opinions on this. But like, that's my argument against people who keep talking in Star Wars. They're like, well, yeah, but it's like they have to, and they start saying this shit. And I'm like, Marvel did all of this. Marvel did all of this correct. So they don't get an excuse of like, well, they're trying to deal with it. Well, Marvel had all this like canon stuff that they could draw from. And like, so did Star Wars. And there was this extremely huge extended universe. And the mistake they made was paying attention to none of it. And then finally, when The Last Jedi and then Solo bombed at the office, they decided, oh, we got to pull all this stuff in and maybe we should pay attention to it. And that's where the Rise of Skywalker came from. And that's why there's so much, like you said, Jay, Clone Wars fan service.
So you don't want any spoilers, right, for Rise of Skywalker?
I've got them all, but
just,
this
is just not a spoiler. I challenge anyone to find a storyline in Rise of the Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker. There is no arc of the hero. There is nothing happens in the entire movie except lots of a collection of intense moments put together that have no rhyme or reason at all. There's no connection from one moment to the next. It's just like to create more toys and somehow but some people loved it. I cannot understand. You must not have watched any movies in the past 40 years if you like this movie.
Yeah.
So you must have just wanted to see, let's just see Rey again. Oh, there she is. let's see Poe again. There he is. And then you love it. Yay, I
You're
saw
like playing
Poe
with
again.
Legos. It was like written by an 8-year-old with all their Legos in front of them.
Let's put in a lesbian kiss. Yay, there's a lesbian kiss.
Oh my God. Like, yeah. And then the craziest thing, and this will be a spoiler, but like, and I didn't see the movie, so the fact that I know this is nuts, but they're like, yeah, there's like a cavalry charge on a Star Destroyer. And I'm like, why would it feels like somebody just like exactly what you said, like somebody just shoved all these elements together and they were like, you know what would be, it's like a kid who goes to the fountain drink with like the soda and then just hits every single one to put it into one thing.
Well, that's exactly what it's like because speaking of that cavalry on the Death Star, there was one moment in there where, you know, Finn is about to die or whatever. And then fortunately the Millennium Falcon shoots right underneath him. They open up the hatch. Lando Calrissian's like, come on. And, you know, Finn drops right in. What does that remind you of? End of Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Like every single moment in Rise of the Skywalker relates back to some other film.
This is like,
And by the way, sometimes it's not Star Wars. Sometimes it's Star Trek. It relates back to.
That's so funny.
Like the whole thing's insane. And then, okay.
That's like the cute cut to the clip of George Lucas. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Well, and by the way, George Lucas did not write most of Star Wars. He had this idea, arc of the hero, space Western, combine the latest science fiction special effects with Western stories, which by the way,
and samurai films.
Right. And his vision is finally realized only in The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
So he writes the script for Star Wars. It's so horrible. They don't know what to do with it. So his wife, Marcia, who he then divorced immediately afterwards, rewrites the entire script.
And edits it into what we know today as the original Star Wars.
Right. Like she was the genius.
She's the genius who put it together. You look at some of these original clips, and I love that, like, there's in the Empire of Dreams, they even say it themselves, like, Star Wars made this documentary, and like Lucasfilms commissioned this documentary. And in the documentary, even in their own documentary, there's a line where they're like, the first cut of Star Wars was an unmitigated disaster. Like, yeah, because George Lucas did it.
Yeah.
Like,
and then by the way, the books that were the extended canon and then the canon, whatever. Okay, I don't like the fact that movies, you know, not everyone should have to read 75 books to understand a movie, but they were pretty good. Like, and I had one of the authors on my podcast, Jim Lucino, who wrote Darth Plagueis. He wrote a book about Vader. He wrote a book about Grand Moff Tarkin. And those were good books. And I called him and said, you want to come on the podcast before Star Wars comes, The Rise of Skywalker comes out? And he's like, nah, they cut all my books out. Like, no longer interested.
Yeah, suddenly they're like not canon anymore. They just like,
And they were great. Like Darth Plagueis describes the whole rise of Palpatine because Plagueis was his. Anyway, this is really nerding out. But on Marvel, you would think that maybe Disney did a better job on Marvel. Those were huge hits. And look, to Marvel's credit, the top 10 movies of all time now are all Disney movies.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing how smart Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, did buying Marvel, Pixar. Pixar was their biggest acquisition ever. Then Marvel, he bought for nothing. He bought Star Wars for nothing. And he's created them into the biggest franchises ever. But even Marvel Avengers End Game, which is like the biggest movie of all time now, that kind of disgusted me a little bit. Like, the guy was clearly, Thanos, the villain, was clearly spouting the progressive climate change Malthusian line, which is that, you know, too many people in the universe are taking all of our resources. And by the way, I'm not just making this up, because when the first time you see him in Endgame, he's on a planet as a farmer. Like he's just like watering plants.
Yeah, this is like how he would choose to live his life after his work is done.
Right. And then you have all these guys dressed up in suits. We have to kill him.
Yeah.
Like he's just by himself.
It's super bizarre. And it's strange to watch because you're like, I guess, like, because the thing that hooks you is you're like, I guess that we love our friends who have died enough to want to bring them back, which is why we're cheering for the Avengers in this movie. But it is kind of bizarre because you're like, this guy had like a whole philosophy that kind of made sense when you thought about it.
And not very different from the philosophies of many people
like you said,
now.
Thomas Malthus.
Yeah, and Malthus back to 1830s, where it's always been kind of a trope in world history that, hey, or at least since the Industrial Revolution,
there's too many freaking people.
Too many people. We're not going to be able to handle the future because it's so uncertain. And we see it now. Like, look, as much as I love Andrew Yang, and we were just talking about this earlier, again, there's this fear like, oh no, robots are going to, it's like the Terminator. Robots are going to replace our jobs and then kill us. Because when I bring this up on Twitter, like maybe robots are not going to replace our jobs. The first response I got was, Yeah, but what about when they start killing us?
Yeah.
And
Haven't you seen Black Mirror, James?
Black Mirror, or have you seen Arnold Schwarzenegger in any movie?
Anything
Right.
ever? Yeah.
And let me tell, like I always say, like, okay, do you know any humans? Because the first time a robot, quote unquote, wakes up and becomes human, they're just gonna go home and binge watch Game of Thrones. Like they're not gonna find a gun and start
but the
shooting
problem-
everyone.
Okay, but the problem is that they're going to binge watch Game of Thrones at like to the speed of light, and then they're going to be angry that we didn't produce. They're going to be angry at season 8's conclusion, and they're going to go murder DB Weiss and David Benioff.
Well, or maybe they're gonna start writing better movies, which I'm fine with either. Like
You need to get Sam Harris on your podcast, man, and talk to him about this.
Oh, I had Sam Harris on my podcast, but we didn't talk about this.
gotta talk about
No,
AI,
you know what?
though.
We did talk about AI, and Sam Harris is a great example of super strong intellectual. He's so smart. I read everything he writes, but a lot of people who talk about AI who have no technical backgrounds, and I have an AI and technical background, they kind of talk about this thing, the singularity, where robots are just going to wake up and be intelligent and conscious. It's not going to happen. It's never, ever going to happen. AI was a marketing term to get funding from the Department of Defense. At a basic level, AI is just advanced statistics, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so anybody who talks about the singularity, they have no idea what they're talking
Can
about.
I tell you something? Look, I love you, and sometimes your intelligence frightens me. Like, how much is there? Let me ask you this question, James. Is there a subject that you don't actually know a lot about?
13th century medieval fighting, which Yuval Harari wrote his thesis on. I could not discuss that with him on the podcast.
Seriously? Did he?
Yeah, and then he was like, that was boring, so I switched to writing about the entirety of human history.
I could talk to him about 13th century medieval fighting. Probably.
There you go.
That was for a while. I did so if you're a nerd, you play Dungeons and Dragons. If you are like king of the nerds, you live action role play.
See, I was a nerd, but not king of the nerds.
If you're the emperor of the nerds, you move on from live action role playing to the Society for Creative Anachronists, where you put on actual suits of armor and fight each other.
Right. So I had lots of friends in that.
I love that Robin audibly gasped when I said that.
Okay. I would say though, here's the thing. Because I remember those groups, and I remember people saying, "Hey, you should come to it." And
you were like, "No, thanks. I want to get laid."
No, I wasn't like that either, because I'm still in the nerd category. But the one thing I thought to myself, that is too white for me. And people say, "But you're white," and I'm like, "It's true, but I'm Jewish. Jewish people do not join the Society for Creative Anachronists.
That's true.
We just don't give a shit about medieval fighting."
That's so funny. There was one Jew in the Society for Creative Anachronists, and he just loaned all of us money. So he was the only one who could do it, because in the 13th century, no one was allowed to do it if you were a Gentile.
Right. But even then, it's like, I guess there was like in Shakespeare, had Shylock, but there wasn't really a full banking system. It was just individuals then. But
That's true.
Individual Jews.
Yeah,
So-
individual Jews. They cornered the market, man.
So is there any other movies that, okay, let me ask you about Wakanda. I forget if we've talked about this before. This is so we're just breaking down all the Disney movies. Black Panther.
Yep.
I think this is the most racist movie of all time.
Do you?
Yeah, because it's the Wakandans come out of their little town. They pretend to be shepherds, like the poorest country in Africa, because specifically they don't want other African countries to know about their technology and steal it.
Well, it's weird because the excuse that they use in the story is like, we don't want other countries, not just African countries, but just other colonial
But
powers.
they refer to other African countries, though.
Yeah,
too.
but that's what's so weird about the movies. You're like, other colonial powers can't rival you. You guys have all the most powerful technology on the planet. Like, there's no way that, like, if a bunch of British people show up with a Gatling gun, you guys are just going to shoot lasers at them and stuff. You guys have, adamantium and whatever the other, what is that other stuff, whatever the other stuff they've got there.
Jay, what do they have?
Vibranium. That's it.
Adamantium was more Tony Stark, but
but they supplied, if memory serves, if nerd memory serves, they supplied the adamantium that ended up in Captain America's shield.
Is that true?
Oh, it might have. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, whatever. The material.
But they also specifically referred not just to colonial powers, but they referred to like other African countries. That's why that even in Africa they pretend to be shepherds, so that so I thought it was like they were being racist against Africans.
Definitely weird. It's definitely weird.
And then of course they were racist against white, but they wouldn't let the white guy in. He's like, "Why are you letting a white guy in the country?"
Into the country. It's
which, by the way, and then that's kind of the most extreme Trumpian immigration policy possible. They're going to build literally an invisible wall around Wakanda.
An invisible shield over the whole country.
And everybody here is like, we're Wakandans. And like,
go Wakanda.
They won't let you in. They'll kill you at the border. It's not even a wall. They'll just kill you. So what other Marvel movies? Avatar is not even a movie. I can't talk about that one.
Dude, and then James Cameron's got a whole bunch of those guys coming out. There's just a whole bunch. That's crazy. That's still the highest. I think that's still the highest grossing movie.
Yeah, and
all time.
I can't even. You can barely ask anybody. Do you remember the plot of that movie? Like that movie, has not inspired anybody.
The same exact plot as Fern Gully. It's the same exact. There's a tree, and the tree is great, and we got to protect it. And then the bad people are coming to take it down. And then that's it. That's the whole plot of the movie. A guy who is a human becomes one of the Avatar people.
And then there's a love story.
That's it. And then there's a love story, because of course there is. And like, what's crazy about that movie too is like, people watched it. This is the moment when I was like, okay, we've reached some kind of like new plateau of technology that like we're running into an open field and there are no maps for these territories, because like there were people who were literally killing themselves after seeing that movie, because they're like, life will never be as good as it is in the movie Avatar. And like, how depressing is that? Like, we made a movie so good that like it's that actually happened, and now here we are in this post that world.
But even then, like, it's not that life is that good in that movie, except for the fact that his senses are enhanced when he becomes.
That's the thing.
And so it's basically that movie. It's basically about a drug experience.
Yeah,
and and it basically just says, boy, if you could have a drug that makes you feel like this, life is going to be great.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's just a pro drug, like a pro hallucinogenic movie. By the way, just like Star Wars is, because if you think about it, think about it just realistically.
What else does going into hyperspace mean?
Well, right. Well, think about it. Like, Luke is just this white trash farm teenager living in a desert, and he wants to he's just looking at the stars. Boy, I wish I could be outer space. And his uncle's like, no, Luke, get the hell to work. Like, you can't even go to college. Get to work. We're so poor.
You can't go to Anchorhead to buy some power converters.
We need you in the fields. Somehow we don't have a cotton gin. We need you to like pick weeds.
Moisture farm. There's moisture to be farmed.
Right. And then suddenly this old decrepit homeless guy comes up to him and says,
"Yeah, you heard about the Force,
dude. Your dad rules the galaxy. We got to go kill him now." And then suddenly from there, it's just this drug trip. Like, his aunt and uncle die mysteriously, and he's got to go into outer space with a bunch of animals, and save the galaxy. Like, it's totally a drug trip.
He's hanging out with a smuggler, a really dirty animal, and then
a homeless guy.
Two people who literally don't have souls, and a homeless guy. Those are his buddies.
Right. And then suddenly he can make things float. Like, this is not a drug trip. It's totally a drug trip.
I think he just found a new 5 minutes to do on stage later tonight.
So I think, by the way, this by itself is just one. This is a podcast, and then we should start your podcast.
We should this will probably all end up in it.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.